I would like to start with a question, listening to all your short keynotes. How can we really get sustainability as a subject out of the niche and organize systemic change in our societies with corporations, with policymakers, with civic society? I think this is one question. I just shortly talked with Andreas. This might also be interesting from this perspective of the ECP. So open question to all of you. And what is really the biggest challenge in doing so? Luca, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, well,
Can I get you back? Thank you very much.
So I just bring my experience. I mean, when I was talking to companies like 15, 20 years ago about corporate social responsibility at the time, it was about charities, but about showing, let's say, investments in this, let's say, social dimension. Today, sustainability is a completely different thing, and it's combining, let's say, financial performance with quality, environmental, social, I mean, all together. I do think that our role is extremely important, and probably we don't see it, but we can really, let's say, force companies in changing their behaviors if we do the right thing. I mean, today when we buy one product, I think that is extremely important to read, for example, the label, to understand from which part of the world this product is coming from, to go into a website and understand, let's say, if the company is using or following social standards or not. So there's a lot of things that as individuals we can do to make companies changing their behaviors. And I do see that companies today are, let's say, becoming more and more transparent, because if you are not transparent today, you cannot really, you know, being successful as a company. Then, that said, it's also important that the governments are doing their part, that NGOs are doing their part, that, let's say, private companies are doing their part, so it's a combination of factors. But I do see that as an individual, we can do much more than what we think to change things.
Thank you. You too. Systematic change.
Just to add on this, just from the perspective of an NGO and what I talked about in the cooperation sphere, I think we have to show what we're actually doing and talk less. Not you, no? Sorry. But like, for example, when we talk about making it more sustainable, nobody actually knows what that means.
What sustainable means.
Yeah, what does that mean? So get an example. For example, we want to minimize child death below 5 that is preventable.
Yeah.
So we go and work with GSK, and GSK produces a new pharmacy that prevents spinal cord disease. Yeah, when mothers have this, then the kids die. Okay, it's a huge death in the development world. So they get new markets, and we save kids. So, you know, and then you have to talk about that. That means sustainable development. Yeah, and it's not so. I think you have to make it real and grappable.
And make it very concrete. If we have the example, for example, from Andreas in the morning, he said if you replace the food by something else, you might decrease your what was it, electricity by 4%, something like that. So very concrete figures, very concrete images, etc. Is the Bundesregierung in Germany very good on that? In the way of storytelling? Giving narratives on sustainability, or could you do more?
We could do more, yeah. I would take for how to get out of the niche. I think the one thing is communication. So if we talk about sustainability in the health sector, I think we should talk about prevention. This is a typical health policy expression. And why don't we talk instead of sustainability about prevention policy? We pay in Germany and other countries a lot for, let's say, end of the pipe health medication.
Yeah,
if we are ill, then we go to the doctor and we pay a lot for it. So why not doing preventive medicine and preventive health care for everybody? So this is communication, and you can do that for the business sector, for even military questions. What means security? sustainability and security. You have to translate sustainability into the discourses of different branches and sectors. This is one thing. The other thing is to link long-term or link local and global things. Even in the environmental ministry, we had needed a long time to learn that air quality and climate policies are linked very closely, and we shouldn't do that in different departments completely apart from each other. Now in Germany, with the air quality discussion we see that if we want to reach citizens, the local question and the health question is much more accessible for them than the global, long-term, very invisible effect of CO2 emissions. But this is challenging because, for example, the question of eating less meat is, in general, perhaps at the first sight, it is a good opportunity, a good option. But you have to look very closely what are the side effects of this policy. So I don't plea for. I'm trying to get a vegetarian at the moment. I don't plea for that. But the problem is, in every product, in every process, you have meanwhile long-term and global effects which you can't manage and see at once as a citizen, as a consumer. So you can do a lot of wrong things if you think of, well, I'm now saving some CO2 emissions, but are you saving also resources? Are you saving land use?
So it's an incredibly complex
so
issue.
So it's complex, but we should really do that.
Please.
If I may say something very concrete, a couple of years ago, we have developed an app which is called Sustainable Eye. With this app, which is available for free to everyone, you input basically the food that you are eating, how many kilometers you are driving your car, how many showers you had per week, and you get a score, which is then translated in, for example, energy consumed, CO2 emission emitted, and changing this, you can see the impact that you can do. So changing, reducing, for example, the consumption of beef, you get a different score. So having less shower, more shower, you are affecting this score. So it's a nice game. I mean, you can share also with your friends, and you can see who is, let's say, more environmental friendly, than others. It's a kind of game, but it's very interesting because it's giving to all of you a very concrete idea of what a single action can do. What is the impact on the society?
I want to stick with this idea. You give us a sign if you have collected some questions. You tell us if so long. Okay, so long we go on. You have a question there, third row. Can you maybe come into the front? While we go for your question first, and then I go on with mine. Please introduce yourself quickly. Turn around to Facebook and the audience. Okay.
Hi, my name is Katharina. I work for the German Network for Social Entrepreneurship. Great. And I have a quick question here, because we've been talking about what we can all do at an individual level. And of course, when you implement something in a policy, it becomes very complicated. But I think there are things that the government can do to support companies that try and focus on the social side or the sustainable side. And that's not really happening at the moment. So I was just going to offer to, I'm really bad with names, Mayer-Ries, if there's anything you need in terms of how to implement programs that will help social startups to thrive and to help tackle these issues, we are very, very happy to talk to you about this. Just an offer here.
Thank you very much. Okay. Your answer on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not aware of any program we do in the environmental ministry, but I think we do something for social entrepreneurs. I don't think there's a radical zero, but of course this is something, as I said also in the translation, that we learn that these entrepreneurs, even if they do something for a social good and not an environmental good, and we are typical administration hierarchy, firstly looking on environmental issues, but that we have to learn that by social policies and social engagement, we can reduce also environmental things. So we have even colleagues working, for example, at the moment on an initiative producing clothes or applications from leather out of the boats of migration people which were thrown away in Greece and so on. So people in the ministry are engaging in that, and they are aware of that. But even there's no zero, I would really appreciate and admit that we have to do more in this. But we do a lot of competitive things to raise engagement and to get this engagement initiatives together, to find out which are the best ones, what are the success factors. I think we do something, but we could do more. Yeah.
Just quickly, you, and then we take more questions from you.
Just to say that it's important that government is involved, but at the same time today there's really, let's say, a lot of possibilities for everyone to do, let's say, to go ahead with your projects. Just to say that a couple of months ago I met really a guy of your age, almost your age. He's based in the Netherlands. He came with this idea, probably you have heard about him, to clean up the ocean. So he had this startup, it's called Ocean Cleanup. It's a big, let's say, tube, and with the, let's say, idea to remove the plastic from the oceans. And we are working with them, we are trying to help them out. And he didn't wait for any government to do that. You know, he came with this idea. This idea was developed while he was at school. So he was discussed with his professor at school, then, let's say, the next level at university, and then he went around, he presented it, he got some money from, let's say, companies that wanted to help, and today he's there with his dream, you know, becoming real. We don't know yet if he's going to succeed, but at least he's trying. So this is just to say that, I'm not saying that, you know, governments don't have to do anything. I mean, it's extremely important that we have, you know, support from the government, but at the same time, don't wait for it. I mean, there's really possibility to do whatever you want.
Felix Finkbeiner, who we had here last year, Plant for the Planet, he started at the age of 11, I think, but he had a strong father in the background too. Can we put them up? Great, we put them on the wall. Lovely. Okay, they are quite small. Let's go. Please pick up a question you think is most interesting for you to answer. I read them for you. Please elaborate about the importance of NGO focusing more on social problem solving in a pragmatic way. Or, how can one as a student drive sustainable innovation forward? Or, what is Germany doing to prompt niche startups funding? Why is this not working, etc.? So go for one question. No, not too many at a time. We keep them, yeah? They're in the archive for later. What do you think about Elon Musk? We keep that for later. What, please, let's go with that. What difference can I make as a student?
Can I start with the blockchain generates greenhouse gases emission, and because every time that I talk about this technology, I get all the time the same question, you know, about Bitcoin, and they, let's say, use a lot of energy and things like that. I mean, it's important that you know that there's different kind of blockchain technologies. I mean, everyone is talking about blockchain, but there's, let's say, plenty of others. And in fact, others technologies are not consuming the same level of energy as the Bitcoin. So blockchain is one thing, cryptocurrency is something else. So that's important. Blockchain is something that is going to make things more transparent, is adding features like smart contracting. I mean, not necessarily, let's say, thousands of computers have to be connected all the time to prove that, you know, something is happening. It could be that, I mean, just few hundreds are, let's say, enough to make this proof happening. I mean, this is basically the difference between, let's say, two main technologies in the blockchain. The technology we are using is just using, at the moment, 100 computers connected to, let's say, make sure that, again, one single transaction is in a way approved and registered. I mean, and depending on the volume of transaction, this may go to, I don't know, from 100 to maybe 300, 1,000, but not millions of computers, as is it for Bitcoin. So it's a false myth, I would say, that blockchain per se is consuming a lot of energy. The old, or let's say the big Bitcoin technology is doing it, but Bitcoin is different from blockchain.
Thank you very much. May I pick out another question from there? Because I really want to stick with this idea. How can we create change? Implementation via incentives, nudging, or punishment? We just saw, how many French are amongst you? I didn't ask if you voted for Macron, or I don't do it, but we see in France that what Macron has done with the eco-tax went totally nuts. It didn't work at all. So what do we need? Do we need more punishment? Do we need new tax systems? Or do you build on the consumer and the long-time development via education, although we don't have any time left?
I picked another question. I would like to...
I go for that first.
But I can go for that one
No.
first, yeah. Recurring on the ecotext in France, I would be a little bit careful because you have to differentiate between the incentive to make demonstration and the real basic motives. And I think the motivations of the French people are mostly in social and economic sphere and not in the environment and ecotext thing. That's the same thing with the green idea of five marks for a liter of gasoline. This was just something else fostering something. Okay, incentives. I think German policy and also European policies have learned that they have to make a mix of instruments. It's campaigning, it's giving funding even to social entrepreneurs or other initiatives. It's about regulation, of course. And a lot, what we do a lot is really about communication and bringing science and knowledge together to create some ideas. I think policy does a lot, even also for these niche funding. There was the question of the startups. There's a German sustainability prize for startups funded by some governments and funded by private companies. So things are happening in this respect. So should I pick up?
Yeah, your other question?
My famous question was, what could I do as a student? What makes the difference?
Yep.
Because I think most of you are studying at the moment, you are studying business. And I think you could do a lot of things. And I a little bit remember of what I did, and I studied also economics. So I think the first is, or one thing is, look also on other models than presented by your professor in the world. What is business economics in Africa? How do people think there about business? Also think about the history of your science and what has been developed in the last 300 years, because you can learn a lot from history of science and models, how they have been shaped and socially shaped, and perhaps you get an idea what is necessary for the future. You should, of course, do initiatives on sustainability at your campus. You should read the UN agenda one time. I think in the life it's okay to spend some 2 hours. I think it's 100 pages or something like that, but it's okay. You can read the German version. It's easier for Germans, so what up? I think you can study transdisciplinary. Try to get out of the box. Try to study for at least, I don't know, one seminar in art or music or ethics or science policy. I don't know. Just put some other thing than only business. Yeah? Engage in your campus. Ask your professors to make contact to politicians, to companies. I mean, this is basic, I think, for your high school, but for others not. So try to get out of this scientific tower. And this is some tips you could do really as a single student.
You want to build on that?
Yeah, just very quickly. I studied at the Kennedy School in the US. Maybe some of you know that. And I was brought up with the idea that, it's only business anymore. You know, business transforms. I don't think so. I think regulation is a big part of the picture, and the state has a very important role in this. And please don't forget that, you know? I mean, a company can change maybe a part of the world, but it cannot do regulation. And that's why I think it's very, very important to have that in mind and not to fall prey to this lingo, okay?
Last year it was interesting. When I was facilitating, somebody said, look for the company you want to work for. Can you make the change happen in this company, or are they already doing it? This is tackling the issue of leadership. Somebody of you asked how to combat the issue of corporates not looking out at long-term goals. And you also addressed the question of leadership. So how?
I do think that companies that are not doing that will be out of business quite soon.
Are you really sure?
I'm pretty sure about that.
We have a global economy.
Yeah, but the point is that, I mean, especially, let's say, people like you, the young generation, I mean, you are making your purchase based on some values that are different compared to my generation or other generations. And you are forcing companies to, let's say, do some changes and to make some choices. And I do think that, well, this is not something that is going to happen in 3 days, of course. I mean, it will take some time. But you have all the power to make this change, to force companies changing, to deal with sustainability issues. I mean, there's a lot of interesting cases, you know, where companies have been out of business because they've not been really addressing these issues, you know. So things like quality today are given for granted. I mean, when you buy some stuff, you are expecting that a product is working, right? Price is linked to, again, expectations, and let's say the buying behavior is following also let's say principles that are not anymore based on traditional, let's say, marketing strategies, for example. You know, everything is becoming a little bit more emotional. So tomorrow we are, for example, presenting another interesting project. We are working with the Italian winemaker associations. So they produce a lot of very good wines, probably the best of the world. I mean, I'm Italian, so I mean, but that said, they had an issue. You know, they would like to communicate to their consumers, you know, how sustainable they are, how much water they are using, how much energy they are using for producing a bottle of wine, from which part of Italy the grapes are coming from. And tomorrow, I mean, what we are presenting is that just simply scanning a QR code on a bottle of wine, which I think that we have brought even today, so you can look at it probably later or even tomorrow. The consumer can look at, I mean, a lot of information. Again, would you prefer to buy a bottle of wine, say, forget about the price for the time being, that, you know, has been produced with, I don't know, that level of energy or that one as a consumer? I mean, knowing this information, you can make your choice and you can put out of business those companies that are not sustainable enough in less than what you think. I mean, what is important is that you are curious and you have all the tools that are, let's say, making this choice possible. And here the key word is about trust. So you have to meet a company that you trust, that is able to communicate all this data in the right way. So trust is the key word.
There are many questions which I think are a bit tricky now to follow. I don't go for the one, which is the career you best have to undertake in order to have a great impact on SDGs, maybe later. But I would like to ask another question which is not on their plate, because you talked a lot about cooperations and collaboration and multilateral togetherness. What is the biggest challenge in setting up sustainably multilateral collaboration? You have to do a lot with changing corporations in trying to really make the transformation happen. What is the biggest challenge in doing so?
The different interests of the parties. Because I, as an NGO, have an interest. I mean, like, first interest is to save kids, and then to sustain my operation, and the interest of the company for. I mean, in the essence, is to make money. That is what a company is doing. And to find a common ground in this takes a lot of speaking about what is possible, and is taking a lot on you as like how far can you get away from your core interests, and what is the ethical background or the value that drives you beyond that. But let's face it, a company wants to make money, and we want to save people. And sometimes that contradicts each other, and you have to speak about that contradiction and not wash it away, and to be honest about that. Okay?
How do we come to real pricing, to real prices that really reflect the whole picture of the consequences of a product or a process or a good or anything? Talking about waste, talking about food, how do we come to real pricing?
I mean, there are different ways. One is something related to what has already been said, that we have in the EU, for example, a model of the eco-design regulation, where you compare different products, and only the ones who are over some years the most effective in environmental, for example, environmental indicators, stay in the market and the others have to fade out. So there is always a competition around the first 5 or 6 places. And of course, these products might be more expensive because they include external effects and others do not. But if you look only on the external effects and on the environmental effects, then you have a right now to phase out the others. And so perhaps the price comes higher, but then it is included and the others, other companies or product lines are away from the market. So this is one thing. The other thing is, I think that consumers, by education, by consciousness, by labels, like you mentioned, get an awareness of what is the real quality of this product. Now you have just today the announcement of the Ministry for Rural Affairs to make a label which different levels of quality of meat. It's only pork, as far as I know. But then you can decide as consumer, okay, I pay this level because I know that there is a minimum quality, or I pay a higher price because there's a. So this is introduced by ministries. You have also such kinds of supermarkets who have already introduced that, and this is also a second way. But it is based on free will, and we have not the best experiences with such kinds of only free will acting companies. So I think also we need regulation just to make the price higher. For example, for energy, I don't see any way. We have to make it socially accessible and comparable, but the general price of energy in the world, I think, is too low at the moment. Yeah.
Talking about maybe one of the last questions, talking about incentivization or regulation, what stops us from rewarding companies, tax cuts, or citizens with tokens to purchase goods and services when they show good behavior?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that there's a lot of, let's call it, rewarding schemes or tax cut in most of the countries in the world, you know? So these are based on, let's say, at national level. So those stuff are, let's say, already there. I mean, it's already existing. Then I do think that, let's say, if I look at for example, the clean development mechanism, do you remember the CDM that was, let's say, decided at, let's say, global level, specifically also at European level? A company was getting some tax cut depending on the CO2 emission. And that was then checked and assessed by third-party companies. And we were doing, for example, that thing. But at a certain point in time, let's say, that mechanism failed. And I do think that...
Why did it fail?
Well, it's a combination of things. But it became not anymore something, you know, which was based on clear commitment to reduce the CO2, but is to make more money, basically, to get financial benefits. That was, you know, the thing. And when that happened, it was decided to drop it. But I do think that what will be more important is not only to involve companies, but is to involve consumers. Because then the effect will be much, much higher. So instead of having a group of companies that are, let's say, behaving according to environmental friendly principle, I would say that it would be more beneficial if, let's say, a big number of citizens are going to do that. And again, this is not possible only with incentives. This comes with cultural changes. I do think that there's already a lot of very good regulations. It's just a matter of being informed. It's just a matter of having, let's say, the school starting, you know, with our kids to talk about these things and how, let's say, we can make, let's say, our own impact. I was talking to, let's say, a group of scholars the other day, and we were talking about food and the way they are choosing food. So how many of you are reading the label of any kind of food when you buy them?
Can we do it the other way around? Who doesn't do it? I go more for that question. The others are not
So
decided.
when you read the ingredients, do you think that they have written with a specific order or not? So when you see sugar or, let's say, a fruit or something else in, let's say, one order, do you think that this is by chance or not? Do you know? I mean,
Yes
how
or
many
no?
of you know that
No.
you don't know?
No, they
so
say no.
You have to know that when you read basically the ingredients, they have, and this is a European regulation, they have to be shown based off, let's say, the quantity. So the first ingredient is the one with the, let's say, biggest quantity in the product you are buying. And if, for example, sugar is coming as the second, maybe, you may start to think, well, maybe it's too much, or, I would prefer that sugar is coming one of the last. And this is the way that you can make your own choice. But if you are not informed about that, and existing regulations that potentially can help you in making your choice, you're not going to do it. So just to go back to the, let's say, the first question, incentives are important, but there's already a lot of things that you can do because there's already a number of regulations that are, let's say, allowing you to make choices based on what you would like to achieve, in terms of, let's say, being sustainable.
Thank you three very much. I thank you very much till here and now for your contribution. I thank you very much for your tons of questions. I'm very sorry that we couldn't answer them all. We'll keep them for Florian and the Hochschule to go and chew on them in the future. I now have a question, another question from you. Can you share with us on volatility, what was a thought which was surprising for you, or a fresh thought for you, or an information or an idea that is worth to keep? Can you share this with us on volatility and put it into your smartphone? And then you'll be rewarded with a fair coffee pause and good and nice food. And please read what's on the backdrop of the product. So for a moment, please share with us, because it's very helpful for us to build on that. And the good news is, in the afternoon, we have more than a handful of startups that are really building on what you talked about. And we'll talk with them in practice. How do they do it? Which is the humans they work on? Which are their learnings? What is the help they get? What do they seek for in the future? So that is what we are going to share in the afternoon. So thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you three very much for your contributions. Thank you.